Evan and Ethan Martin were identical twins who shared the same face but lived completely different lives. Evan was calm, steady, and dependable, the kind of man who always followed through with his word. Ethan, on the other hand, was charming, adventurous, and unpredictable. He lived out of a suitcase, chasing photography jobs across cities, never staying anywhere long enough to unpack his heart. They had grown up in Portland, Oregon, and though they were close as kids, time and choices had built a quiet distance between them. Evan had built a simple but fulfilling life. He worked as an architect, lived in a small but beautiful apartment downtown, spent weekends fixing old furniture or hiking the trails outside the city. He didn't chase excitement, he chased peace. And when he met Claire Matthews, he felt like life had finally given him that peace in human form. They met at an art gallery opening where Claire was displaying her students' paintings. She was an art teacher, warm, gentle, with a creative spark that seemed to light up every room she entered. She wore her hair in loose curls and had a soft, genuine laugh that made people around her feel at ease. Evan wasn't usually the kind of man to approach strangers, but something about her drew him in. They ended up talking for hours about colors, life, and how both of them secretly preferred quiet mornings to big crowds. That night, when he walked her to her car, she smiled and said, "You don't talk much, do you?" Evan smiled back, "Only when it matters." From that moment on, they were inseparable. Their relationship grew fast but steady. They spent Sunday mornings making pancakes, walked by the river after work, and filled their home with laughter and music. 6 months later, Evan proposed under the same bridge where they shared their first kiss. Claire said yes without hesitation. Everything felt right. But peace, as Evan knew from life with his twin brother, never lasted long. A week before their engagement party, Ethan called unexpectedly. His voice was cheerful, almost too cheerful. "Hey, brother, guess who's finally coming home?" Evan was happy, but cautious. Ethan hadn't been home in nearly 2 years, and when he was, chaos usually followed. Still, family was family. He told Claire about it that evening, and she smiled. "I've heard so much about him. I can't wait to meet the famous Ethan." Evan chuckled. "Just remember, he's a charmer. Don't believe half the stories he tells." When Ethan showed up, it was like no time had passed. He walked into the apartment with a grin, his camera slung around his neck, his hair slightly messy from the wind. "Evie, man, you look serious as ever," he said, hugging his brother. But when his eyes landed on Claire, something shifted. His smile softened. His gaze lingered for a second too long before he said, "And you must be the woman who finally made my brother smile again." Claire laughed politely, a little surprised by his confidence. Evan brushed it off. Ethan was always like that. Still, something in his tone made Evan uneasy. Over the next few days, Ethan settled into the spare room and quickly became part of their routine. He joined them for breakfast, told stories about his travels, and made everyone laugh with his quick wit. Claire enjoyed his energy. He was easy to talk to. Too easy, Evan thought at times. She would ask him about his photography, and he'd show her breathtaking pictures from Morocco, Italy, and Alaska. The two of them would talk for hours about art and meaning, while Evan quietly listened from across the room. One evening, the three of them sat around the fire pit in the backyard. Ethan joked about how boring Evan used to be in high school. He once spent prom night fixing a leaky faucet instead of dancing. He said. Claire laughed, covering her mouth, and for a brief second, Evan caught Ethan's eyes, that teasing look that always carried a challenge. Later that night, when they were alone, Claire noticed Evan was quiet. "Are you okay?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "Yeah, just tired." But he wasn't tired. He was troubled. He'd seen that look before. Ethan had always been reckless with boundaries, especially when it came to people's hearts. The next morning, Claire mentioned casually that she'd run into Ethan downtown. "He said he was looking for some photo spots, so we grabbed coffee," she said. "He's really interesting." Her tone was innocent, but something about the ease in her voice unsettled Evan. "You could have told me," he said lightly. "I would have joined." "Oh, it was spontaneous," she replied. He just saw me on the street. Evan nodded, but inside, unease grew stronger. Ethan hadn't mentioned it when they met later that day. He laughed about everything else but skipped over that little detail. Days turned into weeks, and the tension grew quietly between them. Ethan was always around helping Claire paint, fixing lights, making jokes that sometimes sounded a little too personal. Evan told himself it was all harmless. But one night as he walked past the living room, he overheard their laughter, soft, low, intimate. He stood there for a moment before walking away without saying a word. The next morning, he confronted Ethan. "You're getting too close," he said firmly. Ethan raised his brows. "Close. I'm just being friendly." Evan's tone hardened. "You know what I mean?" "Yes, my fiancée." Ethan smirked faintly. "And she's also a person who enjoys good company. Don't be so insecure." Evan clenched his fists, but said nothing more. He knew if he pushed, Ethan would only push harder. But what he didn't know was that the situation was already deeper than it looked. Later that evening, while cleaning the coffee table, Claire found Ethan's camera lying there. She picked it up absent-mindedly and started flipping through the pictures. Landscapes, city lights, strangers smiling in the streets, and then one photo made her stop. It was of her, sitting by the cafe window weeks ago before she even met Ethan officially. She was looking out the window, sunlight falling on her face. It was a candid shot, soft, beautiful, and oddly personal. Her heart skipped. Why would he have that photo? When she asked Evan about it, he froze. "He took that before I even met you," he said slowly. "That doesn't make sense." Neither of them spoke for a long time. The room felt heavy. Finally, Evan said quietly, "Maybe it's just coincidence." But even as he said it, he didn't believe it. That night, as rain hit the windows, Evan sat alone, thinking about his brother. He remembered all the times Ethan had taken what wasn't his, the jobs, the chances, the attention. But this time it wasn't about pride. It was about love. And he knew that if Ethan truly wanted Claire, he would find a way to reach her heart. One photograph at a time. Evan didn't want to lose her, but deep down he felt the first cracks forming. And for the first time in years, he feared his twin brother not as a rival, but as a man capable of breaking everything he loved. The next few days passed under quiet tension. Evan went to work early and came home late, pretending everything was fine. But the air inside the apartment felt heavier each evening. Claire noticed his distance but didn't press him. Ethan, however, seemed more at ease than ever. He spent his days editing photos at the kitchen table, humming to himself, acting like nothing was wrong. The unspoken weight between the two brothers grew thicker with every sunrise. One Friday afternoon, Evan came home earlier than usual. He found Ethan in the living room, flipping through his camera. "Hey, you're home early," Ethan said with a grin. "Claire's out buying groceries. You two are hosting dinner tonight, right?" His tone was light, but Evan's eyes were drawn to the screen on Ethan's camera. Another picture of Claire, this time smiling at something out of frame. Evan's patience cracked. "Why do you keep taking her pictures?" he asked. Ethan blinked, feigning confusion. "She's beautiful, Ev. You can't deny that. Artists capture beauty, remember?" "That's not art," Evan said sharply. "That's crossing a line." For the first time, Ethan's grin faded. "Relax. You've always been too protective. She's not a fragile doll." Evan stepped closer. "I'm not asking. I'm telling you, stop." The room fell silent. For a moment, it felt like they were teenagers again, fighting over something neither could truly win. Ethan finally nodded and muttered, "Fine," before walking out the door. Evan sat down, exhaling deeply, trying to convince himself he had done the right thing. That evening, Claire came home cheerful, carrying bags of groceries. "You two, okay?" she asked after noticing the tension. Evan hesitated but smiled. "We're fine. Just brother stuff." She didn't ask further, but later that night when Ethan didn't show up for dinner, she felt uneasy. The next morning, a soft knock came at their door. Claire opened it to find Ethan standing there with a bouquet of sunflowers. "For you," he said casually. Apology flowers. I upset Evan yesterday. Claire blinked, surprised but touched. That's very kind of you. She took the flowers and smiled politely. Ethan stayed at the door, his expression unreadable. He thinks I'm trouble, Ethan said quietly. He's probably right. But I didn't mean to make things awkward, Claire sighed. You didn't. He just worries a lot. It's who he is. Ethan smiled faintly. Yeah, he always did. That night, when Evan came home and saw the flowers, his face changed. He came here, didn't he? Asked. Claire nodded, explaining what happened. Evan said nothing, but she could see disappointment in his eyes. I think he's just lonely, she added gently. Evan didn't reply. He simply went to bed early, his thoughts circling in endless loops. A week later, everything changed. Claire was helping one of her students with an art project when she got a call from an unknown number. Claire Matthews. The voice asked. This is Detective James from Portland Police. Your fiancé, Evan Martin, there's been an accident. Her world stopped. When she reached the hospital, she found Evan conscious but pale, lying in a hospital bed. His car had been hit on the highway after a truck lost control. Thankfully, his injuries weren't life-threatening, but the doctor said he'd need a few weeks to recover. Claire stayed by his side every day, reading to him, feeding him, helping him sit up. Ethan visited often too, bringing food and small gifts. His presence helped at first. He made Evan laugh when he could, lightening the mood. But slowly, his visits became longer, more personal. He started showing up even when Evan was resting. One afternoon, Claire came to the hospital and found Ethan sitting by Evan's bed, holding a photo in his hand. It was an old picture of the twins as kids, covered in mud, laughing. You two were adorable, she said softly. Ethan smiled. We used to be inseparable. Then we grew up and became strangers. He looked at Evan, asleep. You know, I always admired him. He's the strong one, the one who builds things that last. Claire looked at him with gentle sympathy. You both have something special, she said. Just different ways of showing it. Ethan turned to her. And what about you? What do you build? She smiled faintly. A life, I guess. Or I try to. There was a long silence. Then Ethan whispered, he's lucky. Claire's heart gave a small, nervous flutter. The way he said it wasn't teasing, it was sincere, almost sad. She looked away quickly, pretending not to notice the emotion in his voice. Days passed and Evan eventually returned home. Claire took care of him while Ethan promised to help with errands. But what should have been a peaceful recovery turned into something else. Ethan was always around bringing groceries, fixing things, sharing old family stories. Claire tried to stay polite, but she felt caught between gratitude and unease. One evening, when she went to the porch to water the plants, Ethan joined her. The sky was orange, the air soft with the smell of rain. I didn't mean to make things uncomfortable, he said quietly. She looked up. You didn't. It's just been a lot. He nodded. I get it. You make him happy. I see it. But I also see something else. Her breath caught. What do you mean? He hesitated, eyes fixed on the sunset. You've built a life that looks perfect from the outside, but inside, you look like someone who's holding her breath. Claire didn't know what to say. The words hit too close to something she hadn't even admitted to herself. Yes, she loved Evan deeply. But lately, she had felt like something in her life had gone quiet, like she was living carefully instead of fully. I shouldn't have said that, Ethan added quickly. Forget it. But she didn't forget. His words echoed in her mind for days. She tried to shake them off, but every time she saw him, she remembered the tone of his voice. Not flirty, not manipulative, just honest. A few nights later, Evan was resting on the couch and Claire stepped out for a walk. She didn't realize Ethan was sitting on the porch until he spoke. You okay? She nodded. Just needed air. He smiled softly. You always walk like you're chasing something, or maybe running from it. She gave a small laugh. Maybe both. They talked for a while about life choices, regrets, It was nothing inappropriate, yet it felt too personal. When she finally stood to go inside, Ethan said quietly, "You remind me of light trying to escape a frame. You deserve to shine on your own." The words made her chest tighten. She didn't reply. She just walked inside, her heart unsteady. That night, she lay awake next to Evan, staring at the ceiling. She felt guilty for even thinking about Ethan's words, but they wouldn't leave her. It wasn't about attraction. It was about being seen, truly seen. Something about Ethan's honesty stirred emotions she didn't understand. The next morning, Evan noticed her distance. "You seem off," he said gently. She smiled faintly. "Just tired." But deep down, she knew it wasn't just tiredness. It was confusion, tangled between loyalty, guilt, and something unspoken. Meanwhile, Ethan had made a decision of his own, one that would change everything. He packed his bags quietly that evening. When Evan asked where he was going, Ethan smiled and said, "I think I've stayed too long. You too need peace." But before he left, he slipped a single photo under Claire's sketchbook, a picture of her standing under the porch light, smiling faintly into the dark. Under it he had written, "Sometimes what we see in others is the reflection of what we've lost in ourselves." When she found it later that night, her hands trembled. She didn't know what it meant or what to feel, but she knew one thing for certain. This wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of something she couldn't yet name. Days passed after Ethan left, but his absence didn't bring peace. It brought silence, the kind that lingered even when everything seemed normal. Evan healed slowly, spending his mornings reading and his afternoons working from home. Claire did her best to focus on her students, but her mind often drifted. Every corner of the apartment seemed to hold a trace of Ethan, a coffee mug, a photo frame, the faint scent of his cologne. One evening, as Claire was sorting old papers, she found the photograph he had left behind. Her fingers trembled slightly as she turned it over again, her image under the porch light. His words written beneath, "Sometimes what we see in others is the reflection of what we've lost in ourselves." The words stayed in her mind like a whisper she couldn't silence. That night, while Evan slept, she sat by the window, watching the rain slide down the glass. She tried to understand why Ethan's words bothered her so much. Maybe because they were true. She had built a stable life, safe, predictable, and quiet. But somewhere along the way, she had lost her own spark. She loved Evan deeply, but their love had become a routine, not a heartbeat. Ethan's presence had reminded her of who she used to be, passionate, spontaneous. Full of dreams, the next morning Evan noticed her distant look. "You've been quiet lately," he said, pouring coffee. "Just tired," she replied softly. He smiled and kissed her forehead. "You work too hard." She smiled back, but her thoughts were far away. A week later, Evan suggested they take a short trip to the countryside. "Fresh air will do us good," he said. Claire agreed. They rented a small cabin near a lake surrounded by tall pine trees. The place was peaceful, with only the sound of wind and water. For a while, it felt like things were mending. They cooked together, took long walks, and shared quiet laughter. But every now and then, Claire would see Evan wince in pain from his injury or stare blankly into space, lost in thought. On the second night, as they sat by the fire, Evan finally spoke. "I've been thinking about Ethan," he said. Claire froze. "What about him?" "He texted me last week. Said he's moved to the coast. He's doing photography full-time now." She nodded slowly. "That's good." Evan looked at her. "He asked how you were." Her eyes flickered to the fire. "Why would he do that?" "Because he cared about both of us," Evan said quietly. "He wasn't all bad, you know." Claire looked into the flames, unsure what to say. The truth was, Ethan wasn't bad. He was just lost. And maybe, in some strange way, she had been lost too. When they returned home, Claire went back to work, but the days felt heavier. One afternoon, while scrolling through her phone, she stumbled upon a local gallery announcement, a photography exhibition titled Reflections of Light. The featured artist's name caught her breath. Ethan Martin. Her heart pounded. She stared at the screen for a long time. Should she go? Should she tell Evan? Part of her wanted to ignore it, but curiosity nodded her. She told herself it was just art, nothing more. That weekend, she went. The gallery was filled with soft music and framed photographs of city lights, rain-soaked streets, and portraits of strangers. She walked slowly, absorbing each piece until she stopped at one photo that froze her in place. It was her standing on the porch, just like the picture he had left behind, but captured from a slightly different angle. Her eyes were distant, lost in thought. Someone spoke behind her. "I didn't think you'd come." She turned, and there he was, Ethan. His hair was longer, his expression calmer, but his eyes were the same. "I saw the post," she said quietly. "I didn't expect to see that photo." He nodded. "It's one of my favorites. Not because of how it looks, but because of what it means." Claire crossed her arms, unsure how to respond. "What does it mean?" He smiled faintly. "It means we capture moments we're afraid to lose." There was a long pause. The air between them felt heavy but calm. "You shouldn't have used it," she said finally. "Evan would—" "I didn't name you," he interrupted. "To everyone else, you're just a woman in light." She looked away, unsure whether to be angry or touched. "You shouldn't have done that," she repeated, but her voice lacked strength. Ethan sighed. "You think I'm trying to cause trouble again, but I'm not. That picture wasn't about you. It was about what I learned from you. You reminded me that sometimes people hide their sadness behind calm smiles. I used to do that too." She felt something tighten in her chest. "Ethan, this has to stop. I can't be part of this anymore." He nodded. "I know. I just wanted to thank you. You made me pick up my camera again for the right reasons this time." Before she could reply, someone called his name from across the room. He smiled, said goodbye, and walked away. She stood there for a moment, heart racing, then quietly left the gallery. That night, she didn't tell Evan where she'd been. But guilt weighed on her. The next morning, she finally confessed. "I saw Ethan yesterday," she said softly. Evan froze. "You what?" "It wasn't planned. He had an exhibition. I went to see it." He stayed silent for a long time. Then he said, "You should have told me." "I know. I'm sorry. I just needed to understand everything." Evan sighed, rubbing his forehead. "Claire, I'm not angry. I just wish you'd stop letting him live rent-free in your mind. He's my brother, and I love him, but he brings chaos wherever he goes." Tears filled her eyes. "I didn't mean to. I just wanted to close that chapter." He took her hand. "Then let's close it together." Spent that evening talking, really talking about their fears, dreams, and how things had changed between them. For the first time in months, they were honest. Evan admitted he'd felt insecure ever since Ethan appeared again. Claire admitted she'd felt unseen for a long time. They promised to fix things, to rebuild what had faded. The next day, as the sun rose, Claire went outside with her camera, a gift Evan had given her years ago. She hadn't used it in ages. She took a picture of the sunrise, the light spilling over the rooftops, and smiled. For the first time, she felt a quiet peace. Later that day, she got a message from an unknown number. It was a photo, a picture of the same sunrise, taken from a different angle. Beneath it were 4 simple words. "See the light again." She didn't reply. She didn't need to. She simply looked at the photo one last time, smiled softly, and deleted it. When Evan came home that evening, she showed him her photo. "I think I want to start taking pictures again," she said. He smiled. "Then do it. Let's create something new." They stood together on the balcony, watching the sunset. The air was calm, the sky glowing orange and gold. Somewhere far away, Ethan was probably capturing the same light. But for the first time, Claire didn't feel torn. She felt free. Months passed, and life slowly returned to normal for Claire and Evan. The tension that once clouded their home had faded, replaced by something gentler, quieter, more real. They had both learned that love wasn't just about grand gestures or passionate, was about patience, forgiveness, and choosing each other even on the hard days. Claire started taking photos again. What began as a way to fill her afternoons turned into something more meaningful. She captured small things, raindrops on leaves, children playing by the park, the reflection of light in puddles after a storm. Each picture told a story of stillness, of healing. Evan supported her completely. He even cleared a small room in their house so she could have her own creative space. "Every artist needs their corner," he said with a grin. One morning, Claire received an email from a local art gallery. They were looking for community photographers for an exhibit called Everyday Light, which was open to amateur artists. Her heart raced as she read the message. She hesitated for a long time before showing it to Evan. "You should do it," he said immediately. "Really? You think anyone would care about my photos?" "I do," he said. "You just need to believe it too." With his encouragement, Claire submitted a few pictures she had taken around their neighborhood. She didn't expect much, but 2 weeks later, she got a message saying her work had been selected. She laughed and cried at the same time, overwhelmed by a mix of joy and disbelief. The night of the exhibition arrived. Claire wore a simple blue dress, her hair loose over her shoulders. Evan stood beside her, proud and supportive. The gallery was filled with soft lighting, quiet chatter, and the hum of background music. Her photos were displayed near the entrance, simple shots of morning sunlight through curtains, a reflection on glass, and a couple walking hand in hand down a path. People stopped, looked, and smiled. A few asked her questions about her inspiration. She told them she wanted to capture ordinary beauty, the kind we miss when life feels too heavy. The night was perfect, peaceful and full of warmth. But halfway through the event, she noticed someone at the back of the room. He was standing near the far wall, camera around his neck, watching quietly. Her breath caught for a moment. It was Ethan. He looked different, calmer, older somehow. When their eyes met, he nodded once, a silent acknowledgement. She didn't walk over. Neither did he. They didn't need to. Later, when she and Evan were leaving, Ethan approached. "Claire," he said softly, "congratulations." "Thank you," she replied. "I didn't know you were in town. It's just for a few days. I saw your name on the exhibit list. I wanted to see for myself." Evan joined them, his tone kind but firm. "It's been a while, Ethan." "Yeah," Ethan said, smiling faintly. "You look good, brother." The air between them was awkward but not hostile. It was as if time had dulled the sharp edges of their past. After a short pause, Ethan reached into his bag and handed Claire a small envelope. "This is for you. It's the last photo I took before I left the coast. I thought you might appreciate it." Claire hesitated, then took it. "Thank you." He nodded, then turned to leave. "Take care of each other," he said before walking out into the cool night. They stood there for a moment, watching him disappear into the city lights. Claire looked down at the envelope, uncertain whether to open it. Evan touched her hand gently. "Go ahead." Inside was a single photograph, an image of a calm ocean under a pale sunrise. At the bottom, Ethan had written a small note. "Peace is not forgetting. It's learning to live with light again." Claire smiled, her eyes misting. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Evan nodded. "Then maybe it's time we frame it. Not as a memory of him, but of how far we've come." Weeks turned into months. Life became steady again. Claire's photography grew in recognition. Local magazines featured her work. She started teaching weekend workshops for beginners, helping others see the beauty in everyday moments. Evan fully recovered and began volunteering at a local youth center, mentoring young athletes. One evening, as they sat together on the porch, watching the sky turn gold, Evan said quietly, "You know, I think your brother helped us more than he hurt us." Claire smiled. "He's your brother, Evan. You can say it," he chuckled. "Okay, my brother. I still don't forgive everything he did, but maybe it all led us here." She nodded slowly. Sometimes life breaks what's comfortable to make space for what's real. As the evening deepened, Claire pulled out her camera and took a picture of him sitting in the warm glow of sunset. "What was that for?" he asked, smiling. "For us," she said simply. A few days later, she received another message from Ethan. It wasn't a letter, just a photo. It showed a quiet street corner with two people walking side by side, seen from a distance. Beneath it, the caption read, "Keep walking. The light always follows." Bye-bye.